Cambodia's economy has been one of the casualties of the July clashes, with foreign investments down along with tourism. Susan Yu reports now on how uncertainty about the future is affecting more than just the Khmer people's pocketbooks. But despite the country's troubles, she catches up with those who are still bullish about the kingdom.
Some refer to it as the last frontier in Asia. It's here you can find Johnny Walker and Mao Zedong at the same crossroads. Setting up business in Cambodia couldn't be easier, with a cash-strapped government hungry for investments.
For a company setup, it's all official. It's simply that you don't have to go through the difficult approval processes that are sometimes existing in other countries in the region.
David Doran advises clients on all the ABCs of setting up shop here. Since the fighting in July, that's been more difficult.
Whenever there's a change in government, there's always a question of enforcement of contracts that are executed with the previous government or executed with the new government. A number of clients have raised this issue to us, wanting to know whether signatures of the current government officials will bind the government to the contract or to the license or to the approval for the foreseeable future for the next 5 years, next 10 years.
Companies have flooded the government with claims for compensation, $100 million worth, for damages caused by the July clashes. The regime so far has promised to make up for a fifth of that amount. Many are testing the waters. In the 2 months after the coup, the government says it approved projects worth $62 million. That's compared with $360 million worth for the first half of the year.
It's really hit the consumer market, especially the sales of consumer products in the premium sector, the high-end beer segment and certainly cigarettes, that Cambodians have started to either trade down or reduce consumption quite significantly.
While the Khmers are spending less by up to 40%, the two best economic indicators, alcohol and tobacco, are recovering slowly despite a 10% downturn. In late September, the country's currency dropped to an all-time 3-year low of 3,800 riel to $1 American dollar. It's usually traded at 3,300. Today, it's up to about 3,500.
Your typical Cambodian now is, I would say, a lot more cautious. He's saving a greater degree of his income than ever before. I think this is really saving and preparing themselves for maybe increased uncertainty. You've got to remember the Cambodians have been through this all before, and they have visions, whether right or wrong, that this may return again.
What has returned are international flights to the beleaguered country. Dragonair and other airlines resumed flights about 2 months after the fighting. But on the ground, tourists are few, and that's making life difficult for those who depend on them. At the National Museum in Phnom Penh, the political unrest is taking a toll on heritage.
Now, there are only 5 visitors to 10 per day. We don't have another fund to provide to the staff, to the all work in the National Museum. We are worried about this.
And with good reason. Ticket sales have dropped from $10,000 a month to about 1,000. Some believe the media are to blame for keeping investors and tourists away.
I think the media must take some responsibility. There's a lot of conflicting evidence and stories, and sometimes a bit of misreporting. We've seen it since the beginning of July. Stories were fabricated sometimes to make a good story so they could sell overseas.
Some may beg to differ, but there's no question reporting has become an occupational hazard in Cambodia, with recent attacks on journalists and their organizations. What was the situation before the coup as far as number of papers that were circulating? And now, compared to now?
We are around 60 new title of newspaper. And now we are 8, only 8, including half from the opposition group.
How many journalists have been killed? Freedom without killing, okay. But freedom with killing a journalist, what kind of freedom?
But depending on who you talk to, there's been an overall improvement, especially in security.
As businessmen, I think it's always good to have one captain in a ship than two captains. We cannot comment on which captain is good or bad because we are just businessmen. We have concrete, positive result for our industry. We import easier, we export easier, we have less trouble with documentation, and we have less costly, we call tea expenses.
No doubt roadblocks are now gone, and fewer weapons, at least on the surface, are on the streets. There are government moves businessmen like Ban Suweng more than appreciates. How serious was the problem?
Give you an example. From the port to the capital, depend on the daytime. Evening is much more. We have to, not we have to, but the transportation has to settle at least 12 to 15 check block. Now we have only one.
But for hoteliers, that's no consolation.
The repercussions from the political strife are being felt at every level. Completion dates for up-and-coming hotels or the restoration of hotels have been rolled back, along with the number of jobs and promised wages. Now, hoteliers don't expect to recover from their losses until late next year.
Raffles International had hoped to reopen the Royal Hotel around this time, after renovation work was to be completed. But it became a casualty of the July clashes, when tourism and work came to a halt. That resulted in the Royal Hotel's relaunching date being pushed back by 2 months. Early this year, it had hired nearly 400 staff, but just over a month ago, it announced 120 workers would be laid off. That set off nasty labor problems for the company. For the 391 hoteliers in Phnom Penh alone, the Raffles incident is a warning of perhaps things to come.
So what they are doing is doing all this checking before we send it for further operation.
For Francis Chang, though, labor problems are the last thing on his mind. The Hong Kong businessman is bullish about prospects in Cambodia. He's planning to set up several more garment factories like this one just outside Phnom Penh.
In politics. So I think, of course, there is a certain risk factor in political instability, as you said. But assessing the risk, it won't be larger than anywhere in China or in Vietnam. So I don't see politically this is more unstable than any other country. I have also started up a factory in China in '89. That was right before the Tiananmen incident. So I mean that was also having a very big impact on the confidence level about China. So this I would consider somewhat the same situation.
Many know their investments can unravel as quickly as they're set up. But then again, that's the nature of Cambodian politics, in which patterns are never really followed.
Susan Yu with that report. Next week, we'll tell you why banning landmines is just the beginning in fighting the